welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Life in Law. My name is Theodora Antar, and we're here today with a special guest, Sean Olson. Sean, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
And would you like to maybe just tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name's Sean Olson. I'm a personal injury lawyer in Colorado. Our main office is located just west of Denver. We practice throughout the Mountain West, doing personal injury work and medical malpractice.
Great. And what brought you towards that career path? Is that something you always wanted to do, or?
No, not really. I kind of fell into it. I was invited to be. I used to work on behalf of police officers, firefighters, EMTs. And I was invited by a student of mine to be trial counsel on a case that had been pending for a decade with her and her father. And they asked me to come help when it was finally put in front of a jury. And I worked on that case for about a year and a half. It was on behalf of a young lady who was permanently and severely injured as a result of a drunk driving crash. And that case changed my career trajectory. It made me think about the law differently. And I decided at that point in time, we're going to make a switch. And I made the switch over to personal injury work after that.
That's awesome. And so do you primarily deal with insurance companies in most of the cases?
Yeah, probably 98% of the time, there's an insurance company on the other side of some variety or another.
And do you think that that makes it easier or better in terms of, like, if you were going to choose a type of law, if somebody was going to go into a certain practice field, do you think that because of that, personal injury is a better field to be in?
I think personal injury is just a better field to be in because it's a fascinating way to practice law. You get to work on behalf of people instead of corporations or insurance companies, and you get to make a difference in people's lives. That's what I think is the most appealing thing about the work that we do. Quite frankly, I'm surprised not everybody does it.
And so how many years has it been now that you've been doing this?
I think we are in our 9th year doing personal injury work.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. And you have, I guess that you've had some experience with journalism in the past.
I did. Yeah. Law is my second career. I started out after undergrad. I was a journalism major in college. And I started out doing some local news and things like that. And that ultimately evolved into documentary work and cable television shows and things like that. And before I dropped out entirely and went back to law school.
And where did you graduate?
Undergrad, I graduated from Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, and then law school out here at the University of Denver.
Okay. Yeah, I actually, I did 2 years so far at the University of Connecticut School of Law. And
okay.
And then I ended up going on a leave of absence because of personal health and family and some legal stuff going on. So it's just was too much to juggle full time and also put 100% of myself into everything else. So I'm sort of paused right now with it, but I did almost 2 full years and I really enjoy it. It was always my dream to be a lawyer ever since I was little. And I actually interned with a personal injury firm and had a couple accidents I was in years ago that I had some firsthand experience with the process. So I always said, I would love to do something like personal injury because it's not like family law and criminal law where it's really like, there's, for a lot of people, there's so many emotions involved. And I think that when you're dealing with the insurance companies, it sort of is easier because it's not just like the client and the client's counsel, it's like the client's insurance and the insurance counsel. So there's less emotion and it's easier for negotiations and arbitrations and things like that. And I think it's better for somebody, because a lot of times people get emotionally invested in their work.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Yeah, it's not. I've done some family law in my past, and I know exactly what you're talking about. This is
Yeah.
uh, this is far less emotional on both sides of the aisle, I think.
Yeah, and like you said, you're also able to help people because, people can be injured and have to deal with like lifelong trauma and stuff like that. And so it's nice to be able to have an attorney who can just handle everything for you. And do you usually take your clients on a contingency basis?
Uh, 99% of the work that we do, probably even more than that, is all on a contingency fee basis. Yeah.
And that's great because a lot of people will say, "Oh, I want to sue, but I don't have a lawyer, or I can't afford a lawyer." So many people don't even realize that in personal injury, that's usually the standard.
Yeah, I think that's the case. And yeah, no one realizes that it's really a no risk proposition. I mean, there are firms that won't pick up costs along the way. We pick up costs along the way. We front all of that. We work on a contingency. Yeah, when someone hires us, they are not they're not shelling out any money at all. There's no retainer. There's no cost forwarding on their behalf. It's a risk-free proposition for them.
And how many of your cases, percentage wise, would you say typically make it to the trial level?
Oh, very few. I think the statistic is like, 95% of cases settle without going to trial or something like that. And that, I think that's probably accurate. Well, we don't get into trial probably as often as we'd like to, because quite frankly, cases resolve, and eventually someone says, yeah, that's enough to get things done.
So it's really focused on the client and their wishes and needs with the case.
Always has to be. Yeah. I mean, it's selfishly, I'd like to see myself in trial more often, but if a client says I've had enough, then we've got to do what's best for them and what they want to do. And litigation is not an easy process to go through. Litigation is tough on clients. You're exposing parts of your life that you don't normally talk to anybody about, and you're doing it in an adversarial situation, and you're waiting, and there's time involved, and people just want to see a finish to the things that they've started like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you do cases in both state and federal court?
We do state, federal court, depending on where we are, who the defendants are, which court needs to see us.
And is it just Colorado right now, or do you do other states as well?
No, we are. So I'm licensed in Colorado, New Mexico, and Wyoming,
Okay.
and we see cases throughout the Mountain West, really.
Okay, great. And you also do a little bit of medical malpractice as well?
We do, yeah. I'd say 25% of our work is probably medical malpractice on behalf of injured patients.
And do you think that that process is a little bit more complex and difficult than personal injury with, say, accidents and things like that?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, when you're talking about a car crash or something, it's sort of your prototypical personal injury case. The elements are relatively easy to hit. Negligence, causation, and damages. Most of them can be assumed along the way. Whereas with medical malpractice, it's complicated, and you have to work for every single element of a negligence action. You have to prove the negligence, you have to prove the causation, which is often the most difficult part of any medical malpractice case. And it's challenging because whereas in a car wreck you might hire an accident reconstructionist, in a medical malpractice case I've got to hire three different experts to prove one particular point, and three more to prove something else. And so they're complicated, they're expensive, they're difficult. The lawyers lined up on the other side of the aisle are very good, and so it makes our job more challenging, but it also makes it more interesting.
Yeah, I've heard people say that also, like a lot of the laws are more favored towards the doctors and practitioners than the patients. Is that what you've experienced as well?
No doubt that that is true. Yes. Legislatures throughout the country have looked after doctors in that respect, limiting, putting caps on damages and making things harder to bring. The laws are intentionally set up to make it difficult to sue doctors.
And are there any movements or like proposed legislation to try to fix some of those issues that kind of everyone runs into?
Occasionally it pops up. The damages caps in Colorado are increasing over the next 5 years. And occasionally, they realize something's unworkable and not working. But for the most part, those laws, are here to stay. They came around in the, late 80s, early 90s. It's part of tort reform, and they're not going anywhere. Not yet, anyway.
So would you recommend that if somebody finds themselves in a situation where they're injured, that they should speak to, a personal injury lawyer as soon as possible to get a consultation before maybe like statute of limitations run out?
100% of the time. I think most personal injury lawyers are going to talk with anybody for free, right? Most of us aren't charging for a consultation or anything like that. And, I think it's important for people to understand what their rights are, what they're looking at, what their case might actually be. And, you can do a lot of Google lawyering for yourself, but you're not going to get the real answers about you and your individual case. And, I always recommend somebody talk to a lawyer if they even have a question as to what they're looking at. Talk to a lawyer. You don't have to hire them. But take a few minutes and talk to one and make sure you understand exactly what it is that you've got.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to things like discovery and things like that, where a lawyer will know exactly what to do to preserve that stuff early on, whereas somebody trying to navigate the process on their own isn't going to think of that, and maybe they'll just miss out on opportunities along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're into discovery and that kind of thing, that means you're in a lawsuit at that point in time. And I would never recommend anybody go into a lawsuit without a lawyer. It's just a dangerous place to be.
What if the person can't get a lawyer that will take the case?
Well, I mean, if you can't find a lawyer who will take the case on a contingency fee basis, that might be saying something about the case itself. So you have to question whether the case that you've got is a winnable one. But if you've got a winnable case and you still can't find a lawyer to do it, then you got to understand that it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of research, and it's going to take a lot of thoughtful practice to get done what you need to accomplish. Because the other side's going to come at you with lawyers. There's no doubt about that, whether you've got one or not.
Absolutely. And how many lawyers do you have at your firm currently?
We are 5 lawyers big at this point in time.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah. And everybody practices multi-state throughout Wyoming, New Mexico, and Colorado.
That's great. And you mentioned that you also do some work with nursing home abuse. Can you say a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of falls under our medical malpractice umbrella. Nursing home abuse is something we see far too often, in a variety of different ways. What it boils down to is nursing homes are just understaffed, they're undertrained, they're underfunded. And as a result, people cut corners to make profits. And, oftentimes it's the residents of those nursing homes who suffer as a result. They're our most vulnerable people that we have, perhaps other than children. And, we put them into these institutions thinking they're going to be cared for. And when they're not, it's a horrible situation. I mean, people get hurt, they die. And there's really no one that's going to hold folks like that accountable other than personal injury lawyers. The state's not going to do it.
Yeah. And do you get like clients that sometimes maybe don't have family and they're by themselves?
Occasionally we do. I think those types of clients, and I'm sure they're out there, have a difficult time reaching out and finding us. So most of the time, when we're contacted by a family member or a sibling or someone who's close to that resident, who knows that they were injured. Because oftentimes, the folks who are in nursing homes are mentally incapacitated already and don't have the resources, both financial resources and the ability to reach out for help to someone that they don't know.
Yeah, and it's kind of unfortunate because like the ones who are the most vulnerable maybe are the ones with the that need help the most, and nobody's there to advocate for them. So maybe even advertising to that market as well of clients who may not even know that they could reach out to a lawyer if they're being harmed in a nursing home somehow. It seems like there's, with the aging population getting older, it seems that you hear about these horror stories more and more often.
You do, no doubt about that. With baby boomers, retiring and, oftentimes moving into those situations, it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem. No doubt about that. And yeah, giving those folks the opportunity to find us is always a challenge.
Yeah. And do you do a lot of marketing for your practice? Like, do you do commercials and things like that?
We're not TV lawyers. We haven't branched out into TV advertising and that kind of thing. We do marketing. We do a fair amount of digital marketing. We do some billboards up in Wyoming. And but that's really about the extent of what we do. And we have a large referral base, from networking and knowing people and people knowing our reputation.
Yeah. So most of it's like word of mouth, and people will just say like, yes, they took care of me. Here's their number.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of that. Yeah, and we're always honored to have those kinds of clients.
That's how you know that somebody's a good lawyer, when somebody real refers you.
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yeah. I always like to get like an honest opinions because, anybody can go write a review on the internet. But if you have a person that say, this person, I know them, I trust them, I used them.
Yep.
It feels good to know that that person has put in a good word. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Human capital and a human endorsement. I think that means a lot in this day and age.
definitely. So you also have, I guess you said that you have done a lot of work that was rooted in your childhood in Wisconsin. Can you tell a little bit about some of the things from your childhood that kind of inspired you in your career?
Yeah, I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, small farming town. And, like a lot of people, I think that get into personal injury work, I didn't grow up with much. We were a family of pretty modest means. I had a paper route, had my own jobs, and that kind of thing pretty early on. But I think, the thing that I took from growing up in a small town, is a thing that a lot of people complain about, which is that, everybody knows your business. Everybody's always up in your business. But at the same time, when you have that going on, people are looking out for one another, in a community like I grew up in. And, I think practicing law gives us that same opportunity, to look out for the folks who are being run over by life, run over by insurance companies and corporations and people trying to make a buck. So I think that part of my upbringing plays a large role in what I've chosen to do now. I have no doubt about that.
That's good. And it seems like you've came such a long way and, made a lot of success for yourself, which is great.
Yeah, it's worked out okay so far.
Did you find law school to be difficult?
I think it was difficult. I enjoyed it. There's no doubt. I really, really enjoyed my time at law school, despite the work that it was. Having had a career before, it wasn't like going to college again for me. And so I treated it like a job. I got to school every day at 8, and I left school every day at 6. And so I put in my 10 hours every single day. That way I didn't have to stay up late cramming for tests and exams and things like that. Everything I needed to do, I was able to get done inside of that day. And so, having that discipline, I think, helped a lot, helped to make it a much more enjoyable experience, no doubt.
Yeah. And so like if somebody, let's say, has a job full time,
Mhm.
they can't go to campus from 9 to 5 every day. So at the
Yep.
time, were you dedicated to that and not working and putting all your time into that, or were you also juggling work around it?
My first year I was strictly in school full time. I did not have a job. But starting my second year, I started working again. So I always, I had at various times throughout the day or night or whatever, I was also doing legal work I think I worked at a couple of different firms while I was in school. So yeah, I added that extra bit and juggled that along with schoolwork while I was in school, at least for the second and third year I was there.
And it's good if you're doing something related to law while you're in school, because you're also getting real life
Oh,
practice.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's hopefully interesting for you, and that makes it less work like. Uh,
Right?
and you're doing the thing that you're studying to be. And there's, no doubt about if you can work and get a paycheck and get valuable experience at the same time, it's kind of a bonus.
And do you ever take on any interns, law student interns at your firm?
We do. Yeah. We take on interns. Sometimes we hire those interns as lawyers. Typically we find them at the, University of Denver here because it's local. And, it's a great way to give back to those kids and give them an opportunity to see what we do and give them an opportunity to, work in the real world of law and see, try to figure out what they want to do with their careers.
And do you do it both for credit and not for credit, like both
Well,
paid and unpaid type
yeah,
internships?
well,
Interested?
yeah, we'll do whatever the student requires. If they need credits, we'll work, we'll let them work for credits. If they want to just work to get a paycheck, we'll let them do that too.
Great. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's nice having kids around who are doing that because it's a different energy for sure.
Yeah. And they're eager and they want to learn and they're fast.
Absolutely, absolutely. Not some curmudgeonly old attorney working for us.
But that's great. So have there been any like kind of like famous or notable big cases that you've won at all that are worth mentioning?
I think the case I always find worth mentioning is the one that got me here. The one that we tried against the Westin Hotel, 8-9 years ago now, with Jillian Grow. That was the case that set me on this path. And and the reason it's memorable for me, the stakes were so high for her. If we won that case, we gave her the ability to stay at home and receive care from her parents for the rest of her life. And, if we lost, the stakes were equally as high going the other way. It meant she would end up being institutionalized and, be cared for at a nursing home or something like that for the remainder of her days. And, finding a successful resolution in that case, meant the world to her and her family, I think. And, as a result, it meant the world to me. And, like I said, put me on this path.
That's great.
Yeah, it was life-changing for me, no doubt.
Yeah, and it seems like you really, are passionate about what you do, and you care about your clients. And I think a lot of times you hear people have negative experiences with attorneys, and maybe people might say that they feel like attorneys might only just care about getting a check, and they don't want, to actually care about the client or listen to the client. And it sounds like you make that a priority, and that's the reason, that's really what motivates you, is to make an impact on the client.
It absolutely is. This is the work we do is too hard and too long to not enjoy what we do and not believe that we're making a difference in doing it. So yeah, everything that we do is something we do on behalf of our clients here. I obsess about the client experience and making sure that they feel heard, that their story is getting told. And so even at the end of the day, if we lose, God forbid, they at least can walk away knowing that they stood up to a bully and they stood up, told their story, and had that opportunity.
And so how would you handle a client who, let's say, you think that you could settle for, you get an offer and you think you could settle for a decent amount, but the client really wants to push to go to trial, and you think that if you go to trial, they might walk away with nothing, but the client really wants to go. Will you try to advise the client to settle, or would you just honor that and go, even if deep down, they might lose?
Well, I think there's, anytime we take a case to trial, there's a possibility that we're going to lose. No matter how good we think our case is, it's always a chance that a jury's going to disagree with that. But if a client comes to us, if we're working with a client and they don't want to accept a settlement offer, they want to take their case to trial and take it to a jury, that's what we're going to do. My job is to always counsel them, let them know what I think, and let them know what I think is going to be the outcome of any particular decision they have to make. But at the end of the day, the case belongs to the client and not to us as lawyers, no matter how much we'd like to think it does. The client is the ultimate decision maker, and they're going to tell us whether we settle or take it to trial or abandon the case altogether. They're the shot callers. And we ultimately do what they say with, hopefully with the best information that we can give them.
Yeah, and that makes sense too, to make sure that you're advising them as much and as thoroughly as you can, so that then they're making the best choice at the end of the day for themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, our jobs as attorneys, we're counselors. All we can do is give our clients the information that they need so that they can make an informed decision. And sometimes they rely on us to make those decisions, but ultimately it comes back to them, and they get to make those decisions as to what happens with their case and their life.
And if clients don't have, let's say some clients might not have medical insurance, are you able to still help them with doctor's visits and getting them set up with things like that?
Oftentimes we are, yeah. We see a lot of clients come into us without health insurance, for any number of reasons. And, under those circumstances, if they do have, in fact, have a case, one that we think is winnable, we can often find ways to get them medical care that we can pay off, at the end of the day, at the end of their case, rather than have to worry about paying medical bills up front.
That's really good, because usually if somebody is injured and traumatized and in that situation, they might feel like there's no way to get help. But knowing that, you can call a law firm like yours, get everything taken care of, medical, legal, and peace of mind, and everything is being handled on a contingency basis. It's like, who wouldn't do that? Who wouldn't call the lawyer at that point?
Yeah, I agree. But I think that the whole process of even calling a lawyer can be intimidating for people. Not everybody lives in this world, and not everybody knows how it works. And so, the best we can do is try to educate everybody about what the process looks like, how to get involved and that kind of thing. But, at the end of the day, we have to recognize, people hold us in a different light than they do their neighbor or their friends or their coworkers, and sometimes that's intimidating enough for them to not pick up the phone and call because they don't want to be embarrassed, they don't want to ask a question, which is a mistake. And at the end of the day, so the best we can do is let them know we're people too, and we understand what they're going through. Often, a lot of lawyers have had their own personal injury cases. And, so the best we can do is be here, be available, answer questions, and take time when we need to.
And have you ever had somebody come for a consultation and tell them that you don't think that they have a case?
That happens all the time. Yeah. Especially in the medical malpractice world. Medical malpractice cases are very difficult to prove. And, I think we take on maybe 2% of the callers who call us with medical malpractice claims, for a variety of reasons. And so we have to have those difficult conversations regularly, letting someone know that, I'm sorry you're injured, but I don't think that there's anything we can do, with the tools that the law gives us, on your behalf.
Now, what about, I often hear about people that are talking about things like IIED, like emotional harm, and even people, that like try to sue judges and DCF workers and things like that. Do you ever have cases where somebody is trying to sue somebody who has immunity, whether it's police, judge, courts, and do you take cases like that?
Well, I mean, if a defendant has immunity, there's really not a whole lot of sense in bringing the case in the first place, because you're just prolonging the inevitable. I can't think of a case off the top of my head that we've done that with recently, but anytime someone brings a case that we think is a case that the law recognizes, one that we can find a recovery on behalf of the client, we'll always do the research to find out whether we can or not. And sometimes we'll take on a case and not realize until months later that we don't have what we thought we had. And those are particularly hard conversations to have when you have to sit back down with a client and say, look, I know I told you this, a few months ago, but the more we look into it for reasons X, Y, and Z, we can't proceed because we're gonna get poured out of court, and that's gonna cost you a lot of money. So they're tough conversations to have.
Definitely. And I was going to ask, are there also situations where, like, even if they say that a state employee or something that has immunity, theoretically, that there's exceptions, and that if the person did X, Y, and Z, then the client may still have a case, and that you would encourage people to still go and have the consultation and talk to you if harm was done, even if they think that their person's immune? Because are there those exceptions in certain situations?
Yeah, the law is full of exceptions for just about everything. So I would always encourage, anybody who thinks they might have a case to go talk with a lawyer. Like I said, Google lawyering is only going to get you so far. And, talking with a lawyer and understanding, exactly what you've got, asking questions that need to be answered is really the way to go. I mean, that's the way you find out if you've got a case or not.
And so, but you don't only do physical injury, also you do like emotional, psychological injuries as well, even if the person was harmed in a different way?
Yes, occasionally. I mean, emotional injuries are, they're in that bag of injuries that we're able to recover for. So yeah, no question about it. If it's a case and that's the injury, we'll take that on and, fight the good fight and see what we can make of it.
That's good. So you're always willing to try to fight if you see a chance to win.
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing about doing this kind of work is bringing the fight to those who caused the harm. So yeah, if I don't care what the injury is, so long as the law recognizes it, we'll pursue it.
And so, do you plan to grow with the firm and possibly maybe open up additional offices, or future plans for growing further?
I think so. We've been doing a fair amount of growing over the last 2 years, and I don't suspect that we're going to slow down for the time being. My anticipation is we'll end up adding more lawyers, more office space, and hopefully venture into a few other states around the Mountain West along the way. That's my goal anyway.
And so, have you ever had a client ask for you to appear in a different state, where at like pro hoc vice or whatever it's called?
Yeah, we've done that on a few cases. So I've practiced throughout the country at this point in time, Alabama being the most recent place that I made an appearance.
Wow.
So yeah, occasionally that happens where we'll appear pro hoc and get local counsel to help us out and that kind of thing. It happens, and it's just a matter of taking the time to understand that state's law and that local jurisdiction's rules. and, getting up to speed on those kinds of things. And after that, advocacy is advocacy.
And do you have an ability where people can fill out like a form on your website if they don't want to call, that they can type up what they want to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you visit our website, you'll find we've got a chat bot down in the lower right hand or lower, right hand corner, I guess, that people can talk to. They can fill out a web form. They can send an email. There's probably 100 different ways for folks to get in touch with us if they're not comfortable picking up the phone and calling.
Okay, great. And so are there any other exciting developments or anything that's coming up that you want to talk about or bring up?
I don't know. We're in this rapidly changing world of AI and that kind of thing. I mean, it's disrupting everything, and I think it's exciting trying to figure out how to work in that new world. Whether that's practicing law, finding clients, and things like that using AI, because it's like I said, it's changing everything, and people are using it to practice law, sometimes unsuccessfully. But it's an exciting time to be a lawyer, I think. A lot of people are intimidated by it, but it's another technology. It's another tool that we all have to learn how to use properly. And I think if we do, it's going to make our lives easier ultimately.
Yeah, and I see like there's through the law school, we've gotten access to things like Lexis and Westlaw, which have their own AIs, and there's
Yeah.
other more advanced AIs with premium paid versions that are really high level. And so, many of them are even designed for lawyers and law firms and things like that. So what's your take on that? Do you think that done properly and efficiently and still having a human check for errors at the end is something that can be used as a tool to help with managing cases and things like that? Or do you dislike it? What's your opinion about AI?
Oh, it is absolutely a tool that we can and should use as attorneys to help our clients. But like anything else, it's a tool. It's not something that's here to replace our brains and our ability to think through a problem. The place where most people get hung up, most lawyers have gotten hung up, is asking ChatGPT or some other program to write a brief for them, and ChatGPT or whatever that program is will just hallucinate sources and law and things like that. And the place we all get hung up then is we don't go back and check that work, and do the things that we're taught first year in law school, which is to do, check your citations before you submit that to a court. And I think a lot of lawyers, unfortunately, get caught up in the speed of the thing and submit it without doing that thing that we were taught first year of law school. And that's where people get in trouble. So if you use it like a tool and not a replacement, I think it's a very helpful thing to have at our fingertips. I mean, it 10x's our ability to perform on behalf of our clients.
Definitely, I agree. And I think if you know like exactly which sources and material to plug into it and are very specific, you can get a high level result versus, like you said, when people just blindly rely on it and don't check their work and don't verify it after, it's going to make mistakes. But if you're going to start from scratch and go and do the research by yourself and start from square one versus that, you do save a lot of time and energy.
All right. Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about something that would normally take you a week to do, an AI program could possibly get that done in 5 minutes. And so it doesn't make sense not to do it. And I think we owe it to our clients to embrace that tool and use it to the extent that we can, because our clients deserve it.
And have you ever had to call out any opposing counsel for maybe fake case law and things like that?
Not yet. I have not run into that myself, and I hope I don't.
Yeah, I think that some lawyers have been sanctioned and things like that. So
they have it. It has cost some lawyers dearly, both in money and reputation, by getting caught doing that.
Yeah, but like you said, it's like you have to use it as a tool, just like with any other research tool. You can't just depend on it.
Absolutely.
I think they don't teach kids enough these days about critical thinking, which is something that is, any good lawyer will be good at critical thinking, and people will just listen to something and not really analyze it and ask questions and try to make connections. And I think that they need to really start teaching people, especially in the world of AI, where people are getting fooled by videos and pictures, and you can't tell what's real and what's not. I mean, how does that work with, you know as a lawyer, with evidence and stuff like that? Now that people can make a fake video and a fake picture that looks real, how can you
Yep.
tell? Are there experts that are trained to distinguish between AI and things like that? Or is this
Boy,
so new?
I sure hope there are, because that stuff's getting better and better as time goes on. And it's something I think about all the time. Yeah, I mean, how do
Yeah.
we know, 5 years from now, whether that video that looks absolutely legitimate was made by AI or not? These days, I think you can look at things and the human eye can pick things up. But all this technology is in its infancy, and we're just seeing the very beginning of it. And the very beginning of it is pretty amazing. So it's scary a little bit to think about what it might be capable of 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road. Uh, but yeah, you're right. I mean, that's where critical thinking comes around, and sadly, within this Instagram era where we're used to 20 seconds of our attention, it's hard to devote an hour of attention to something, and lawyering requires that. Good lawyering requires it anyway. It requires critical thinking, analysis, and really diving deep into something that may seem obvious on the surface. And, finding out what the truth really is, and ultimately, that's our job as lawyers: find the truth.
Yeah. And people also need to remember too, like, if you have a jury, the jury needs to be able to make that decision and say, like, is this what it's purporting to be? Is this video legitimate or not? And, if I think that there's going to have to be a lot of regulation with AI in the future in order to kind of keep things in control, because right now there's really zero regulation.
Yeah, it's moving so fast at this point in time, and our system is not really developed to work with anything that moves this quickly. So, any regulation they put in place today would be outdated a year from now, and our political system is not set up to accommodate for that.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see kind of how things progress over the next few years. But yeah, like you said, it was like I was actually in law school when one of my professors, it was my contracts professor, asked our whole class, I think it was maybe like January of 2022, February of 2022, when the trial version of ChatGPT first hit the internet.
Oh
And
yeah.
she asked our class, like, did anyone ever hear about ChatGPT? And everyone said no. And then she literally told us all about it and showed us it in class. And after that, we were all like just playing around with it. And that beta version that they had before it like went really live was like totally unfiltered. Like you could type in anything and it would just do it. Then when it went live, they're like, sorry, this goes against our guidelines or whatever. So they definitely
Uh,
watered it down a bit, but it's just fascinating to think, like, in 2 to 3 years how much it has advanced. It's just unbelievable. So it's scary
Absolutely.
time, but it's the new world and the future is here. So we have to kind of deal with it.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Yeah.
So is there anything that you would say to anybody who's maybe considering going to law school, that advice you would give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best advice I can give is take a little time off after college and go walk the earth, get a job, see how life actually works, before going back to law school. It's going to provide anyone with a whole lot more context of the oddball things that you end up learning while you're in law school. And I think, taking a contracts class or an administrative law class, it's sometimes difficult to understand the concepts they're teaching without actually being able to see how those things impact real people in the real world. And I think having a couple of years under your belt of, being in the world makes a world of difference in your ability to understand what you're learning when you get to law school. So I guess that's the best advice I would give. Take a couple of years off before you go. And once you get there, work hard, take advantage of the time you've got while you're there, and make it a success for yourself, so that when you finish that up, doors are open for you. You've got the ability to do the job, to go out and make a career and a life of it.
And do you think that it is important to try to get as much experience, field experience as possible while you're in school through internships and things like that as well?
Never hurts. Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, anytime you can get real world experience versus, time in a classroom, it's going to benefit you. It's going to benefit the people who employ you. You're gonna put a little bit of rocket fuel into your career path by doing that.
And I think that what you've done by opening up your own firm is sort of the path I would lean towards, rather than many of my classmates were saying they wanted to get jobs in big law and work at these
Mhm.
firms and work 90 hours a week. And I feel like a lot of people think that that is the definition of success. But when you open your own firm, you have the freedom to be your own boss, and you can make your business how you want it to be. And I know you had experience working before going to law school. Do you think that even somebody without business experience or work experience can open their own practice, or do you think that it's necessary to have that business background in order to really thrive at it?
Well, I think you can without having any experience. It can be done. I know people who have done it. I think it's very difficult to do that, to go start with a blank slate and just figure out how to practice law and run a business at the same time, because they're two very different skill sets. And law school definitely does not prepare you well for either one. And so to launch yourself out of law school and into starting a business is a very challenging thing to do. Not that it can't be done, it can. But I think there's probably a lot of value in going to work somewhere else just to get your feet underneath you, see how the law is practiced, see how someone else has done it, and learn some things over the course of a year or two before launching out on your own. It's not there's a million ways to get it done. And none of them are the wrong way to do it. It's really what you're comfortable with. But I guess I would hesitate to recommend to anybody, graduate law school and, the following day open up your own shop. I think getting some experience under your belt is probably beneficial.
Definitely. And did you start with a partner or just solo?
Well, I worked for law firms for almost 10 years before I launched this version of Olson Personal Injury Lawyers. So I had an idea of, how the practice of law works, how the business side of it works, a little bit anyway. But in this doing personal injury work, I've never had a partner. It's just, I own the firm, and to date, I have not taken a partner on yet.
So when you decided to go with your own firm, you started by yourself.
It was just me in a tiny little office in downtown Denver. Yeah.
Are you still in downtown?
No, we're out west. We're in a town called Golden, out by Coors Brewery.
Okay. Colorado is a huge state, right?
It's pretty big. There's a lot of open space out here for sure.
Do you ever get people have accidents from like skiing?
We do occasionally. We don't actively look for those cases. There are some firms around here that specialize in that kind of work. We've got a lawyer here who does that kind of work and enjoys doing it, but it's not our bread and butter. They're more one-offs than anything else.
Yeah, it's more like a rare once in a while.
It is, and the law grants the ski industry a great deal of immunity from suit as well, which makes those cases difficult.
Because they're signing waivers and stuff.
Yep. waivers and statutory limitations and all manner of immunity that the ski hills get.
Yeah, so it's like there's a whole branch of law that's like there to protect, like, institutions and big corporations and things like that. But then what you're doing is fighting to protect the people that are saying, no, we can still recover because of X, Y, and Z. So I think that's
Oh, absolutely.
honorable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the insurance companies, the corporations, the ski hills, they all have money, and, they lobby legislatures, and they look down the road, 5 years down the road, as to what's possible. And they make sure that the law protects them. There is no organization for people who might get hurt in the future. And so as a result, there's no lobbying effort really that's done on their behalf or anything like that. So the law is always going to favor the big guys, the guys with the money, the guys who can hire lobbyists. And, it makes our jobs difficult, but not impossible.
Which is why, how is lobbying even legal?
That's a topic for a whole other discussion.
That's what I always wonder. How is that even allowed? But like you said, that's another story.
Indeed it is.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy, so thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us today and share with us. And I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, Theodora. I really enjoyed it.
And what's your website if anybody wants to reach out?
protectingthewest.com.
protectingthewest.com. Okay, that's easy to remember.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much again. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Theodora. You as well.
Thank you. Take care.